You're listening to Holy Sync Radio Podcast. Today's podcast, kids shouldn't have to recover from the people who were supposed to protect them.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Holy Sync Radio Podcast. I'm Thomas.
And I'm Nilsa.
You know, I had a completely different podcast planned this week. I was going to talk about the new studio, the radio station, everything God's been doing lately. But every time I'd start putting notes together, I'd end up right back here. I just couldn't shake this topic.
You've been talking about it all week. You'll be driving, and all of a sudden you'll say, I've been thinking about something. Then we end up talking about it for the next 30 minutes. So I kind of knew this was coming.
Yeah, you did. And I think the reason it kept coming back is because I keep looking at kids. Kids at church, teenagers, our grandson, families we've met over the years. And I keep asking myself the same question. What are these kids carrying that they were never supposed to carry? That's where the title came from. Kids shouldn't have to recover from the people who were supposed to protect them.
When you first told me that title, I kind of took a step back. I thought, wow, that's pretty strong. But the more we talked about it, the more I realized this really isn't about blaming parents. It's about looking at life through the eyes of the child. That's what changed it for me.
Exactly. And I want to say something before we go any further. If you're divorced, if you're a single mom, if you're a single dad, please don't turn this off thinking we're here to judge you. That's not our heart at all. Actually, it's the opposite. The reason I'm talking about this isn't because I'm proud of what I did. I'm talking about it because I don't want another parent making the same mistakes I made. If my failures can become somebody else's wisdom, then maybe they weren't wasted.
And that's really how we've always tried to do these podcasts. We're not sitting here because we've been perfect parents. We've made mistakes, we've had regrets, we've had conversations where we looked at each other and said, I wish we would have handled that differently. I think parents connect with honesty a lot more than they connect with perfection.
I agree. People ask me all the time, how do you know all this stuff about parenting? Well, because I got a lot of it wrong. Seriously. If I only taught what I did right, these podcasts would be really short. Most of what I teach comes from things I wish I could go back and change. There's an old saying, a wise man learns from his mistakes. A wiser man learns from somebody else's mistakes. That's why I'm telling you mine.
Can I ask you something? Looking back now, what's the biggest lesson? When you think about your divorce, what's the thing you wish you would have understood back then?
That's an easy one. Maturity. I wasn't mature. I thought I was, but I wasn't. I was hurt. And hurt people don't always make good decisions. They make emotional decisions. Looking back, I thought I was fighting with my ex-wife. I wasn't. My kids were paying the price for a fight they never started, and I didn't even see it.
I think that's what happens to a lot of parents. When you're hurting, all you can see is your own pain. You're trying to survive. You're trying to figure out what's next. And without even realizing it, your kids are standing there watching everything. Sometimes they don't say a word, but they're watching, they're listening, they're carrying things they don't even know how to explain.
Can I confess something? This isn't easy to admit, but I think somebody needs to hear it. There were times I didn't pay my child support on time, not because I couldn't, because I was angry. In my mind, it was about her. I thought if I held that money back, somehow I was getting even. Looking back now, I realize how foolish that was. I wasn't hurting her. I was hurting my daughters. And I honestly believe I was hurting myself too. Not because God was standing there waiting to punish me, but because I wasn't living the way He wanted me to live. I wasn't honoring my responsibility as a father. And when you live outside of God's design, eventually you feel the weight of that.
That had to be a hard thing to realize because once you see that, you can't go back and change it. But I also think that's why this conversation matters. There are dads listening today who are exactly where you were, and there are moms listening who are carrying a different kind of hurt. If both of them can stop for just a minute and ask, how is this affecting my child? Everything starts changing.
Exactly. And that's when I started reading. I actually went looking for research because I wanted to make sure I wasn't just talking from my own experience. And honestly, I found something that surprised me. I always thought divorce was the biggest problem. Then I started reading all this research, and I realized maybe we've been asking the wrong question. The research kept saying it wasn't the divorce that caused the biggest wounds, it was the conflict. That surprised me.
Me too, because I think that's what parents focus on. Should we stay together? Should we get divorced? But very few people stop and ask, what does our home actually feel like for our child? Those are two completely different questions.
Exactly. I read one study that followed families for years, and what they found was kids who lived in homes where there was constant fighting, constant tension, constant anger, sometimes struggled more than kids whose parents divorced and learned how to live in peace. When I read that, I just sat there because it made sense.
It really does. I've seen couples stay together because they thought they were doing it for the kids, but the whole house felt heavy. Nobody laughed anymore. Everybody was walking on eggshells. The kids knew something wasn't right. Kids always know.
Exactly. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. They may not understand why mom and dad are fighting, but they know something's wrong. And when they don't understand, they usually blame themselves. That's what breaks my heart. They'll sit there wondering, was it something I did? Did I make mom mad? Did I make dad leave? No child should ever have to carry those questions.
And most of the time, they never ask them out loud. They just carry them. Sometimes they become quiet. Sometimes they act out. Sometimes their grades start slipping. Sometimes they eat because food becomes the one thing that always makes them feel better. Parents see the behavior, but they don't always see what's underneath it.
Exactly. That's something else I found in the research. Pain doesn't just stay in a child's heart. Sometimes it comes out through their body. Sometimes it's anxiety. Sometimes it's shutting down. Sometimes it's comfort eating. Now, we're not saying every child who's overweight has family problems. Not at all. There are 100 reasons that can happen, but stress has to go somewhere. If a child doesn't know how to process it, it usually finds another way out.
I think parents need to hear that without feeling guilty. Because guilt doesn't change anything, understanding does. If you realize your child is carrying something, then now you can help them carry it. That's the difference.
Exactly. And I keep thinking about our grandson. I'm not picking on one kid. I'm talking about something I see in a lot of kids today. They're trying to figure out who they are, while the adults around them are still trying to figure out their own lives. That's a heavy load. A child shouldn't have to become the emotional adult in the house.
No. And children are amazingly resilient. But that doesn't mean they don't get tired. Sometimes we mistake resilience for healing. Just because a child keeps smiling doesn't mean they're okay. Sometimes they're just trying not to make life harder for everybody else.
That's good. That's really good. You know, one thing I noticed when I was coaching kids at church, the ones who felt safe, they talked. The ones who didn't, they usually joked, or they stayed quiet, or they tried to become the smartest kid in the room. Everybody has a way of protecting themselves. We just don't always recognize it.
Can I ask you something? Do you think parents sometimes miss the signs because life is just busy? Not because they don't love their kids, but because they're trying to pay bills. Go to work, figure everything out.
Absolutely. I don't think most parents wake up and say, I'm going to hurt my child today. Of course not. Most parents love their kids. They're just exhausted. They're overwhelmed. They're hurting themselves. But here's the hard truth: our kids still live with the results of our decisions, whether we intended it or not.
And I think that's why this conversation matters. Because if one parent listening today decides, I'm going to stop talking bad about their mom, or I'm going to stop talking bad about their dad, or I'm going to stop making my child carry my hurt, that child's whole future could start changing. That's worth having an uncomfortable conversation.
Exactly. You know something else that really encouraged me? The research also said most kids are incredibly resilient. They really are. They can overcome a lot, especially when they have one stable, healthy, consistent adult in their life. That gave me hope because maybe you're listening today and you're thinking, I've already messed everything up. No, if you're breathing, God's not finished. Your child isn't finished. There's still time to become that steady voice in their life.
And sometimes that's all a child is looking for, not perfection, just consistency, knowing mom's going to be there, dad's going to call, they're going to keep showing up. That kind of consistency builds security, and security builds trust.
Exactly. And maybe that's really what we're talking about today. Children don't need perfect parents. They need mature parents, parents who can stop, take a breath, and ask one simple question: what's best for my child? Not, how do I win? Not, how do I get even? Not, how do I prove I'm right? Just, what's best for my child? Because I've learned something the hard way. Children suffer when adults refuse to grow up. And I know that because for a season, I was one of those adults. There's something I've been thinking about while we've been recording this. I'm sitting here telling people some of the worst decisions I ever made as a father. There was a time in my life I would have never done that. I would have tried to protect my image. I would have wanted everybody to think I had it all together. But you know what I've learned? God can't redeem the part of your story you're still trying to hide. I'm okay living out loud now. Not because I'm proud of my mistakes. I'm not. I wish I could go back and change a lot of them. But I can't. So, if my story helps another dad or another mom choose differently, then maybe my pain wasn't wasted.
I think that's one of the reasons people trust you, because you're willing to say, I got this wrong. There aren't enough people willing to do that anymore. Everybody wants to look successful. Very few people are willing to be honest, and honesty gives people permission to be honest about their own lives too.
Exactly. I said something earlier. Children suffer when adults refuse to grow up. That's a hard sentence, but I wasn't talking about somebody else. I was talking about me. For a season, I was one of those adults. I let my hurt make decisions instead of my maturity, and my children paid for decisions they never made. That hurts to say, but maybe somebody listening today needed to hear another dad admit it.
And maybe somebody listening is thinking, I've already made those mistakes. If that's you, don't let guilt be the loudest voice you hear today. Because guilt by itself doesn't change anything. Grace does. You can't go back to yesterday. But you can make a different decision when this podcast is over. You can call your child. You can apologize. You can stop saying things in front of them that they were never meant to carry. You can decide that today is the day your child stops being caught in the middle.
Exactly. The Bible says, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. I love that verse because it doesn't say you can control the other person. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes they won't cooperate. Sometimes they won't co-parent. Sometimes they won't forgive. But as far as it depends on you, be the mature one. Do what's right. Show up. Love your child. Protect your child. Keep your promises. And never make your child choose between the two people they're trying to love.
Your child doesn't need a perfect mom. They don't need a perfect dad. They just need to know, I'm loved. I'm safe. And the adults in my life are trying. That's what they'll remember.
I can't go back and be a better father to my younger daughters. I wish I could. But maybe I can help another father become one. Maybe I can help another mom. Maybe one little boy or one little girl won't have to spend 20 years recovering from something they never should have carried in the first place. If that happens, then every hard lesson I learned was worth sharing.
If this encouraged you, share it with someone who needs it. New episodes drop every Saturday. You can find us at holysyncradio.com and on Spotify, Apple app for download. And for parent resources, you can download them at tavaleauthor.com. Until next time, keep your heart soft and stay in sync, and remember,
God loves you.